Hey there, travelers. Before we dive into today's story, drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from. Now let's begin our journey into the unknown. The clonazepam dissolved under my tongue, bitter and familiar. I'd taken 3 milligrams that morning, double my prescribed dose, but the tremor in my hands hadn't stopped. Standing outside interview room 7 in the maximum security wing of St. Agnes Psychiatric Hospital, Baltimore, I could feel my pulse hammering against my collar. My name is Dr. Brian Conroy. I'm 42 years old. I've been a psychiatrist for 16 years, specializing in the criminally insane. I work in places like this because I stopped being able to function anywhere else. My ex-wife Lauren used to say I was hiding. She was right. I've been hiding for 3 years, ever since the divorce, ever since I realized I had nothing left worth protecting. The file in my hand was thin, too thin. Patient, Peter Jameson Sims. Age, 54. Former CIA operative. Committed, February 14, 2023. Diagnosis, paranoid schizophrenia with religious delusions. Danger assessment, high. Previous psychiatrists, 13. 13 psychiatrists in 11 months. I pressed my thumb against the biometric scanner. The door was reinforced steel, 3 inches thick. Through the small window, I could see Pete Sims sitting at a metal table bolted to the concrete floor, his hands cuffed to a chain anchored through the tabletop. He was staring directly at the door, directly at me, waiting. I stepped inside. The door sealed behind me with the finality of a tomb closing. Pete Sims was lean in the way soldiers get when they've spent years in the field. Gray touched his temples, and his face was weathered like wind-scoured stone, but his eyes, pale blue, clear, focused. These were the eyes of someone who'd seen too much and remembered all of it. "Dr. Conroy," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled. "You're the 14th. I set my briefcase on the table and sat down. 14th psychiatrist? 14th person who thought they could help me. He shifted slightly, chains clinking. The others lasted anywhere from 15 minutes to 4 sessions. You won't last much longer. Why not? Because once I tell you what I know, you'll either think I'm insane and leave, or you'll believe me and wish you hadn't. He leaned forward. Either way, Dr. Conroy, your life gets worse from here. I pulled out my digital recorder and notepad. Professional routine. Something to anchor me. You claim to have worked for the CIA for 28 years. I worked for a division within the CIA that doesn't appear on any organizational chart. No official designation, no budget oversight, no congressional knowledge. We were ghosts inside ghosts. And what did this division do? We recovered things. Doctor. Biblical artifacts. Objects mentioned in religious texts, hidden throughout history, guarded by organizations that understood their power. He paused, watching me. You don't believe me. I can see it in your face. Mr. Sims, they're already here, Doctor. His voice dropped lower, urgent. The seals are breaking. Everything written in Revelation. It's happening, right now. And there are people actively working to accelerate it. The tremor in my hands intensified. I reached for my water bottle. You're referring to the book of Revelation, the apocalypse. Armageddon, he said, the final battle. The false prophet and the Antichrist leading armies against God. The lake of fire. All of it real, all of it coming. And I've met the people preparing for it. You've met the Antichrist. I've been in the same room with something that calls itself human but isn't. I've watched world leaders, presidents, prime ministers, CEOs, bow to a figure who stands in shadows with a hooded face and a voice that sounds like it's coming from somewhere older than language. My pen stopped moving. There was something in the way he spoke, not the rambling tangents of schizophrenia. Precision, detail, the cadence of someone delivering a field report. Tell me about these meetings, I said. Pete closed his eyes briefly. First one was Vienna, 2018. Private estate outside the city, owned by a pharmaceutical conglomerate. 73 attendees from 26 countries. I was there posing as a security consultant. The meeting took place in a wine cellar converted into something else. The walls were covered in symbols I couldn't read, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at too long. What was discussed? The timeline. How to accelerate certain events. Which governments to destabilize. Which religious institutions to corrupt from within. He opened his eyes, locked on mine. And acquisition targets. 7 artifacts, 7 objects of power, each one necessary for the final ritual. Ritual to do what? Force the prophecy, trigger the end times. Open doorways that have been sealed since before humanity learned to write. Who was leading these meetings? That's the question. Pete's voice took on a hollow quality. The figure never introduced itself, never stepped into light. But everyone there, men and women with power that could reshape nations, they deferred to it, spoke to it with reverence and fear. I've interrogated terrorists, Doctor. I've seen zealots willing to die for their beliefs. But this was different. These people weren't believers, they were servants. And what they served terrified them even as they obeyed. You attended multiple meetings? 47 over 5 years. Vienna, Dubai, Silicon Valley. A monastery in Macedonia that hadn't officially existed since the 12th century. Each organization different in structure, but identical in purpose. And always that figure in the shadows. I found myself leaning forward. What did it want? What every power that opposes creation wants. To unmake. To return everything to void and chaos. But it's patient, Doctor. Patient in ways human beings can't comprehend. It's been working for millennia. And now the board is set. The pieces are in position. The game is ending. And your role? Pete's expression shifted, grief mixing with something harder. I was recruited for infiltration, language fluency, high threat tolerance, but mostly, I was expendable. He rattled his chains. They were right about that last part. They? My handlers. The people within the CIA who sent me into those meetings, into those organizations to recover the artifacts before the opposition could, to secure them in government facilities where they'd be safe. His jaw tightened. Except some of my handlers were already compromised. Some of them were serving the same master as the people I was infiltrating. The air felt heavier. I glanced at the cameras in the corners, their red lights steady. You mentioned 7 artifacts, I said. 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls of wrath. Biblical numerology isn't coincidence, Doctor. It's architecture. 7 artifacts, each one connected to a moment of divine intervention in human history. Each one proof that the supernatural isn't mythology, it's fact. And you recovered these artifacts? 4 of them. Over 18 months. 4 missions that took me to places that shouldn't exist and showed me things that made me question whether I was still sane. He met my eyes. I questioned it then. I questioned. Doctor, I still question it now. The only difference between you and me is that you get to keep your doubt. Mine was burned away. I looked down at my notes. My handwriting was shaking. What artifacts? The lance of Longinus, Solomon's ring, a rib from Cain's tomb, and a plank from Noah's Ark marked by Nephilim claws. Pete's voice was steady, matter of fact. 4 objects that shouldn't exist. 4 missions where I witnessed phenomena that violated every law of physics and biology you were taught. And these missions, I swallowed. What happened? On the first mission, I watched a man die touching the lance. His body split vertically down the spine, torn apart by whatever entity inhabited him being expelled. On the second, I stole Solomon's ring from a tech billionaire who went bankrupt and brain dead 3 days later. On the third, I entered Cain's tomb and watched 3 team members die from a plague that liquefied their tissue in minutes while giant bats tore through our hazmat suits. On the fourth, I recovered a plank from a cursed shipwreck, and 31 people drowned when an unnatural storm dragged 3 ships to the bottom of the Caribbean. He said it all without emotion. Just facts, just testimony. I survived all 4 missions when I shouldn't have, and I started to understand the pattern. 7 artifacts total. 4 in our possession. 3 held by the opposition. And every meeting I'd infiltrated, every shadowy gathering, they kept repeating one word. Armageddon. The file says you reported this to your superiors. Pete's laugh was bitter. After the fourth mission, I went to my section chief with everything: photographs, recordings, artifact samples, testimony. I laid it out clearly. There's a global conspiracy orchestrating the biblical apocalypse, and elements within our own government are complicit. What happened? Psychiatric evaluation, immediate suspension. Within 48 hours, I went from being a decorated operative to being a paranoid schizophrenic with religious delusions. They seized my evidence, classified my record, and sent me here. He gestured to the room, where I've been for 11 months, talking to people like you who want to fix me. Silence settled between us. Through the walls, I could hear distant sounds. Another patient screaming, staff members calling codes. "Why tell me this?" I finally asked. "What do you expect me to do?" Pete reached into his jumpsuit pocket slowly. Security had cleared him, no contraband allowed, but my heart rate spiked anyway. He pulled out a small cloth bundle, set it on the table between us. "Because you're the 14th, Doctor. And 14 is twice 7. Biblical numerology. You're here for a reason." "What is that?" "Proof." His fingers unwrapped the cloth carefully. Inside was a bone fragment, yellowed with age, approximately 3 inches long, curved like a section of rib. Symbols were etched into its surface, angular script I didn't recognize, markings that looked burned rather than carved. "From Cain's tomb," Pete said quietly. "The rib section we secured. I stole this fragment before extraction, kept it hidden through debriefing, through evaluation, through 11 months here. They don't know I have it, but I've been waiting for the right person to give it to." "Why would you give it to me?" "Because you need to understand, need to see what I've seen." He pushed the fragment across the table. "Touch it, Doctor. Hold it in your hand. Then you'll know I'm not insane. Then you'll know everything I've told you is true." I stared at the fragment. Every rational part of my mind screamed warnings. Biological contamination, psychological manipulation, protocol violations. But underneath that rationality, something else stirred. Curiosity, desperation, a hollow ache I'd been carrying for 3 years. "What will it do?" "Show you," Pete said. "Truth without filter, reality without protective lies. Everything that's coming. You'll see it the way I saw it, and then you'll have to decide. Go back to your comfortable numbness, or accept that everything's bigger and more terrible than you thought." My hand was moving before I consciously decided, fingers extending across the table. "Dr. Conroy," Pete said. "Brian, once you touch that, your life changes. There's no going back." "Are you sure?" I thought about my apartment, the empty rooms, the prescription bottles, the life I'd been living that wasn't really living at all. What did I have to lose except comfortable lies? My fingers closed around the bone fragment, and reality shattered. The world didn't end when I touched the bone fragment. It just stopped making sense. I felt the fragment's texture first. Smooth where it should have been porous. Warm where ancient bone should have been cold. The symbols carved into its surface seemed to shift under my fingertips, rearranging themselves into patterns that hurt to perceive. And then something else happened. Something I still don't have adequate words to describe. My vision blurred. The interview room, the cameras, the concrete walls, Pete's concerned face. All of it dissolved into static. I tried to pull my hand back, but my muscles wouldn't respond. I was locked in place. Fingers wrapped around 3 inches of cursed bone, while something ancient and terrible forced itself into my consciousness. But it wasn't the vision. Not yet. What came first was memory. Pete's memories, somehow transmitted through the fragment, flooding into my mind with the force of lived experience. I wasn't watching his missions, I was living them, feeling what he felt, seeing what he saw, understanding, with horrifying clarity, that everything he told me was true. Austria, November 2019. Cold. The first sensation was cold so profound it felt like being buried alive. 9,000 feet in the Austrian Alps. November wind cutting through tactical gear like it wasn't there. I was Pete Sims now, or I was experiencing his memory so completely that the distinction didn't matter. 6 of us stood at the entrance to the bunker, a fissure in the rock face that had been concealed for 74 years. Two of my teammates were CIA, Torp, a weapons specialist from Virginia with 3 tours in Afghanistan, and Flood, a linguist who spoke 9 languages and never smiled. The other 3 were different. Corrupted, Pete had called them, and now I understood why. Their names were Hansen, Vec, and a woman who never gave her name. They looked human, dressed the same, carried the same equipment, breathed the same thin mountain air. But when they moved, there was something wrong about the physics of it. Too smooth, too efficient. As if their bodies were being operated by something that had studied human movement, but never quite mastered the subtle imperfections that made us real. "Radio check," Torp said, his voice crackling through the comm system. We descended into darkness. LED lights mounted to our helmets cut through the black, revealing walls carved from living rock. Nazi engineering at its finest, or most profane. The bunker had been built by slave labor in 1944, part of Hitler's obsession with occult artifacts. Most historians dismissed the stories as propaganda. Standing in that tunnel, I understood they'd been underestimating the truth. The descent took 40 minutes. Stairs carved at precise angles, walls covered in symbols that predated the Third Reich by millennia. Someone had discovered this place long before the Nazis. The swastikas and SS runes were just the latest layer of corruption. The vault door was exactly where the documents said it would be. 3 feet of solid steel, sealed with a combination lock that should have required a cutting torch to breach. But Vec walked up to it, placed his palm flat against the metal, and closed his eyes. "Don't," Flood whispered. "That's not—" The lock clicked. All 12 tumblers, simultaneously. The door swung open on hinges that shouldn't have been able to move after decades of disuse. Torp raised his rifle. "How did you—" "Does it matter?" Hansen's voice was wrong. Not his voice at all, but something speaking through him. "We're inside. Complete the mission." The vault was larger than I'd expected. 30 feet across, ceiling lost in shadow, walls lined with shelves containing artifacts plundered from across Europe. Most were fakes. Expensive, well-crafted, but ultimately worthless. I could feel the difference now, standing in that space. The real objects had weight. Not physical weight, but something else. Presence. Significance. They pulled at something deep in my chest. Recognition I didn't understand. And at the center of the room, on a stone altar that predated the vault by centuries, lay the Lance of Longinus, 7 feet long. Iron shaft blackened with age or blood or both. The spearhead was elegant in its simplicity. No decorations, no engravings, just metal shaped to penetrate flesh. But looking at it made my eyes water, made my stomach clench. This was the weapon that had pierced Christ's side as he died on the cross. The spear that confirmed his death before the Romans could break his legs. The artifact that held, according to legend, the power to control the fate of the world. "Catalog everything," Torp ordered. "We extract all of it." Hansen approached the lance. I wanted to warn him, Pete's consciousness screaming through the memory, but my borrowed body wouldn't move. I could only watch as Hansen reached out with gloved hands and touched the shaft. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then Hansen screamed. Not pain. This was something worse. Fear beyond terror, rage beyond fury. The sound came from somewhere deeper than lungs, rawer than vocal cords. His body went rigid. Arms locked in position, fingers still gripping the lance. And then he started to come apart. The split began at his crown. A hairline crack that appeared in his scalp, running down the center of his skull. I heard bone cracking, sharp reports like gunfire in the enclosed space. His skin tore along the fracture line, revealing muscle and fascia underneath. Blood should have been pouring out, but there was none. Just tissue separating, ribs peeling away from sternum, his entire torso opening like someone had inserted a wedge and driven it through with a sledgehammer. His spine was exposed vertebra by vertebra, each one separated cleanly, held together by nothing but ligaments that stretched and snapped. His arms spread outward, forced into a cruciform position by muscles tearing themselves from bone. And through it all, that screaming continued. But it wasn't coming from Hansen's mouth anymore. Something was being expelled from his body. I saw it for perhaps 2 seconds before it vanished. a shape made of smoke and angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Eyes that were holes into somewhere else. A mouth that opened in directions that violated geometry. And then it was gone, ripped out of Hansen's flesh, torn away by whatever power resided in the lance. What remained wasn't a person, it was meat. Bones. Organs arranged in the anatomically correct position but no longer functioning as a living system. Hansen, or what had been wearing Hansen's body, collapsed in a perfect crucifixion pose. Arms spread, spine straight, face frozen in the moment of that entity's expulsion. Flood vomited into his helmet. Torp was shouting into his radio, calling for extraction. The woman whose name I didn't know had backed against the wall, repeating something in a language that predated Latin. I stood there, Pete's horror flooding through me, and understood. The lance killed evil. Not human evil. Corruption. Spiritual contamination. The presence of something that didn't belong in flesh. Hansen had been inhabited, used, worn like clothing by an entity that served the organizations Pete had infiltrated. And the lance had purged that corruption the only way it could. "We need to move it," I heard myself saying. Pete's voice. Pete's decision. "I have an idea." On a shelf near the back of the vault, I found a reliquary box. Gold and crystal, about the size of a shoebox, containing what the label claimed was a finger bone of St. Peter. I had no way to verify the authenticity, but in that moment I didn't need to. I could feel it, the same presence the lance had, but gentler, protective rather than purging. I used the reliquary as a buffer, never touching the bone inside, just letting the sanctity of the container interact with the lance. Wrapped the spear in cloth that, according to the manifest, had been blessed by Pope Innocent III in 1198. The lance allowed itself to be moved, permitted itself to be carried. I lifted it, and the weight nearly drove me to my knees. Not physical weight. The spear was maybe 15 pounds, but moral weight. Every sin I'd ever committed pressed down on me simultaneously. Every lie, every moment of cowardice. Every time I'd chosen comfort over truth, expedience over integrity. The lance forced me to confront exactly who I was, what I'd done, what I'd failed to do. And I understood, carrying it out of that vault, why the corrupted ones couldn't touch it. They'd already traded away the parts of themselves that made them human. There was nothing left to judge except the entities wearing them. And those entities, when confronted with divine truth, couldn't exist. The extraction took 6 hours. We sealed the bunker behind us. Hansen's remains were left where they fell. No body bag could contain what he'd become. Torp filed a report that was immediately classified. Flood never spoke again. I later heard he'd taken early retirement and joined a monastery in Tibet. And I carried the Lance of Longinus down a mountain, feeling it judge me with every step. Silicon Valley, January 2020. The memory shifted. Seasons changed. I was standing outside a mansion in the hills above Palo Alto, wearing a waiter's uniform, balancing a tray of champagne flutes I had no intention of serving. Marcus Aldridge's estate, 20,000 square feet of glass and steel, perched on 5 acres with a view of the San Francisco Bay. Aldridge had made his first billion in artificial intelligence before he turned 30. His second billion came from quantum computing. The third from neural interface technology that towed the line between innovation and body horror. But his real obsession was older than computers, older than electricity. Aldridge collected artifacts, objects of power that he believed could be reverse-engineered, their principles applied to modern problems. He thought magic was just science, humanity hadn't formalized yet. He was wrong about that, but he'd been right about Solomon's ring. The charity gala was perfect cover. 200 guests, most of them tech executives or venture capitalists, all of them too focused on networking to notice the catering staff. A dozen corrupted ones had been planted over the past 6 months. Security personnel, housekeepers, drivers. They'd waited patiently for authorization to act. Tonight was that authorization. I moved through the crowd, Pete's training guiding my borrowed body. Smile, nod, offer champagne, fade into the background. The collection was on the 2nd floor, in a climate-controlled gallery that Aldridge called his Cabinet of Curiosities. Most guests weren't allowed access, but I had codes provided by a corrupted guard. 17 digits that would disable the sensors and unlock the door. Flood was with me again, along with Torp and two corrupted ones I didn't recognize. We reached the gallery at 9:47 p.m., exactly when the security rotation would leave a 3-minute window. The collection was impressive. Aldridge had spent millions acquiring objects from private dealers and black market sources. Most were forgeries, good enough to fool casual observers, but ultimately fake. A piece of the true cross that was actually 15th century oak. A crown of thorns made in a Parisian workshop in 1823. A nail from the crucifixion that metallurgical analysis would have revealed was Roman but not from the right century. But in the center of the room, in a case of bulletproof glass, illuminated by LEDs that didn't quite eliminate the shadows around it, sat Solomon's ring. Bronze. 2,800 years old, give or take a century. Hebrew inscriptions running around the band, the names of God arranged in patterns that granted authority over demons. According to legend, King Solomon had used this ring to bind 72 demons and force them to build his temple, to command infernal entities and make them serve human will. Looking at it, I felt the truth of those legends. The ring wasn't just a piece of ancient jewelry. It was a tool, a weapon, a key to doors that should remain locked. Torp worked on the case while I kept watch. The security system was sophisticated but not sophisticated enough. Aldridge had installed it himself, trusting technology over human security. Fatal mistake. Technology could be hacked, circumvented, controlled. The case opened with a soft hiss of pressurized air. Torp reached in with gloved hands and lifted the ring. He held it for perhaps 5 seconds, and I saw his expression change. Not fear, confusion, as if he was hearing voices he couldn't quite make out. Whispers just below the threshold of comprehension. "Move," one of the corrupted ones said. "We need to go. Now." We replaced the ring with a duplicate, close enough that Aldridge wouldn't notice immediately. By the time he discovered the theft, we'd be gone. The operation took 17 minutes from entry to exit. No alarms, no confrontations. Almost disappointingly easy. I held the ring during extraction. Ring during bronze, warm from Torp's hands, surprisingly light. But underneath that physical lightness was something else. Pressure. Like standing next to a transformer, feeling electricity hum through the air. The ring wanted to be used. Wanted to demonstrate what it could do. And part of me, Pete's part, the part I was living through, wanted to test it. To speak one of the names inscribed on the band and see what answered. I didn't. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed. 3 days later, Helix Technologies collapsed. Stock price plummeted. SEC investigations revealed accounting irregularities that had been hidden for years. Aldridge's personal fortune evaporated overnight. The official story was fraud, mismanagement, the inevitable crash after years of overvaluation. But I knew the truth. The ring had been protecting him. Not because he was virtuous, but because he'd made a bargain. Power in exchange for service. Success in exchange for loyalty. And when the ring was taken, the bargain broke. Everything the ring had held back, debts, consequences, karma, came due simultaneously. Aldridge survived the suicide attempt but lost most of his brain function. The last I heard, he was in a care facility, unable to recognize his own reflection, muttering words in languages that predated Hebrew. Syria, March 2021. The memory turned darker, colder, despite the desert heat. Northern Syria. A region torn apart by civil war, government forces fighting rebels, fighting extremists, fighting each other. The perfect place for black operations because no one was keeping track of who was killing whom or why. The archaeological site had been discovered by accident. An airstrike collapsing part of a hillside, revealing structures underneath. Pre-Sumerian, possibly older. The kind of discovery that should have made international headlines, but the region was too unstable. So the Syrian government sold access to the highest bidder. The opposition got there first. The same organization running the meetings Pete had infiltrated. By the time we arrived, they'd been excavating for 72 hours, moving tons of earth, violating every archaeological protocol in their rush to reach the inner sanctum. They'd found Cain's tomb, not the original burial site. Cain had died millennia before anyone invented burial practices. But someone, sometime in the ancient past, had discovered his remains and understood what they represented. The first murderer, the first marked man, the first human to carry divine curse, and they'd built a tomb designed to contain that wrongness, to keep it from spreading. We approached at night, 6 of us again. Always 6. Torp, Flood, myself, and 3 corrupted ones whose names I never learned. Hazmat suits this time. Military-grade biohazard protection. The tomb's outer chambers were covered in warnings carved in Proto-Semitic languages. Flood translated as we descended. Here lies the kinslayer. Here lies the first to spill brother's blood. Disturb not these bones, for death walks with them. Fever, hemorrhage, flesh consumed from within. Turn back. Seal this place. Let the marked one rest. We didn't turn back. The opposition team was already inside, working to extract skeletal remains. Our orders were clear: secure the artifacts before they could. The stairs went down, and down, and down, past carved chambers filled with offerings from civilizations I couldn't name, past walls depicting scenes of murder, fraternity betrayed, God's question, where is your brother? Past symbols meant to bind, contain, warn. The inner sanctum was exactly what the warnings promised. Stone platform in the center. Skeletal remains wrapped in preservation materials that should have decayed thousands of years ago, but hadn't. The skeleton was human, mostly, but wrong in subtle ways I couldn't quite define. Bones slightly too long, skull shape unusual, and on the forehead, branded directly into the bone, a mark. Script from a language that predated language. God's mark on Cain, made physical, permanent, eternal. The opposition team had already damaged the preservation materials. 5 of them working frantically to extract a rib section. They wore hazmat suits identical to ours, but I could see the difference. Their movements were wrong. Too coordinated. Too efficient. Corrupted ones. All of them. Engage, Torp said. What happened next wasn't a firefight. It was chaos. Bullets in an enclosed space, ricochets, someone screaming. Flood took a round in the shoulder. One of our corrupted ones went down, though I couldn't tell if the entity inside was dead or just pretending. And then the plague activated. Sensors in our suits started screaming. Bacterial presence at levels that shouldn't exist outside of laboratory cultures. Millions of colony-forming units per cubic centimeter of air. Whatever preservation materials had been protecting the bones, their breach had released something. Something that had been waiting in those bones for millennia. "Fall back!" Torp shouted. But then the bats came. They erupted from side chambers we hadn't detected. Dozens of them. Enormous, 6-foot wingspans, bodies the size of dogs. Their faces were wrong. Too intelligent. Eyes that tracked us with predatory awareness that felt almost human. And they weren't afraid of us. The first bat hit Adkins square in the chest, claws extended. I heard his suit tear, that distinctive sound of military-grade material giving way. He went down, and 2 more bats were on him immediately. Claws and teeth designed to penetrate, shred, rend. Butler fired his rifle on full automatic, hit 3 bats. They kept coming. Torp threw a flashbang. The explosion stunned them for perhaps 5 seconds. "Grab the rib and move," Flood screamed, blood streaming down his shoulder. I reached the platform, wrapped my gloved hands around the rib section the opposition team had been extracting. Bone, ancient and cursed, marked with symbols I couldn't read. The moment I touched it, I felt wrongness flood up my arm. Contamination. The spiritual stain of fratricide. Murder, the first sin that required blood. More bats. Wukari went down screaming. I saw his suit torn open, his face exposed. Saw the flesh start to necrotize immediately as the plague entered his system. Black lesions spreading across his cheek, blood vessels rupturing under his skin. Adkins was already gone, skin sloughing off his hands where the bats had torn through his gloves. He was screaming, but the screams were wet, bubbling as the plague liquefied his tissue from within. "Go!" Torp shoved me toward the stairs. We ran. Flood, Torp, Collins, myself, and one of the corrupted ones. Behind us, Adkins and Wukari and Butler died in agony, their screams echoing through the tomb. The bats pursued us to the outer chambers, then stopped. As if there was a boundary they wouldn't cross. We sealed the tomb entrance with explosives, buried it under tons of rock. The opposition team was still inside, along with our dead. Let them rot together, I thought. Let them keep each other company in the darkness. Collins died 2 days later in a quarantine facility in Turkey. The plague had entered through a microscopic tear in his suit, so small we hadn't detected it during the escape. I watched him die over 48 hours, watched his flesh turn black and slough away, watched him hemorrhage from every orifice, watched him beg for death. I'd been exposed too. 3 tears in my suit where bat claws had penetrated, but the plague didn't take me. Doctors ran every test they could think of. Genetic analysis, immune system mapping, blood cultures, found nothing. No reason I should have survived when Collins died. Maybe you're just lucky, one doctor said. I knew better. This wasn't luck. This was selection. Something had chosen me to survive, to carry the knowledge forward, to be here eventually, telling this story. I kept a fragment of that rib, stole it before we extracted from the tomb, hid it in a pocket of my suit where sensors wouldn't detect it. Kept it through debriefing, through quarantine, through psychiatric evaluation. They never found it. Until now. Caribbean Sea, April 2022. The final memory. The last mission before everything fell apart. 4 ships anchored above a coordinate in the Caribbean Sea. 200 feet down, sitting upright on a sandy bottom, was the wreck of Miguel Enriquez's vessel. The pirate ship that shouldn't have survived as long as it did. The cursed ship that claimed lives every time someone tried to salvage it. I was diving master for this operation. 47 personnel across 4 vessels, enough equipment to establish a temporary underwater base. The objective was singular: find the plank from Noah's Ark and extract it before the opposition arrived. The ship had been remarkably preserved. Wood that should have been consumed by marine organisms centuries ago remained intact. The hull was solid, barnacles and coral growth minimal, as if something about the vessel repelled normal decay. We located the repair section on the 3rd day. The plank was obvious, different color than the surrounding wood, different texture, covered in symbols that looked burned rather than carved. Claw marks gouged deep into the surface. Pre-flood script, Nephilim language. This was actual artifact from Noah's Ark, not legend, not metaphor. The vessel that survived the flood that destroyed the world. And one of the Nephilim, those abominations, those mixed offspring of angels and humans, had touched this wood before they drowned, had left their mark embedded in it. We extracted the plank using specialized tools, sealed it in a waterproof container, began surface procedures, standard operation, no complications. We were congratulating ourselves on the smooth execution when the sky changed color, blue to black-green in under 3 minutes. Temperature dropped 40 degrees. I watched my breath fog inside my wetsuit hood. The water started moving wrong, waves forming geometric patterns, currents running in directions that violated basic oceanography. And then the ships started sinking, not capsized, dragged under. I was still on the deck of the primary vessel when I saw it happen. The ship to our starboard, the Santa Maria, carrying 30 personnel, just settled into the water. Steady, inexorable. Crew members screaming, lifeboats deploying, but the ocean was pulling it down faster than anyone could escape. Through the storm and chaos, I saw something beneath the surface. Shapes, massive forms circling under our hull. Too large to be whales, too purposeful to be natural. They moved with intelligence, targeting specific vessels, avoiding the one that carried the plank. Torp was screaming orders. Flood was on the radio calling for air support that would never arrive in time. The other 2 ships were already gone, dragged under in minutes. I could see heads in the water, people swimming, but the shapes were moving among them, pulling them down one by one. "Full throttle!" Torp shouted at the captain. "Get us out of here!" We ran, storm chasing us for 6 hours, unnatural wind that felt targeted, deliberate. Waves that crashed against our hull with precision, as if testing our integrity. And always, those shapes in the water, pacing us, circling, waiting for us to falter. The storm broke off when we crossed into international waters. Just stopped. Sky cleared. Temperature normalized. The shapes vanished. like something had decided we'd escaped its territory and wasn't willing to pursue further. We made port in Key West with 31 people dead. Good people, experienced sailors. And all I could think was, the plank saved us. The same artifact that made Enriquez invulnerable protected our ship from whatever was trying to stop us. I reported everything to my section chief. Compiled a dossier, 200 pages of evidence, photographs, testimony. Showed them the pattern. 7 artifacts, 4 recovered, 3 in opposition hands. Biblical numerology made physical. Organizations working to trigger Armageddon. Corrupted operatives within our own government. They listened patiently, then scheduled a psychiatric evaluation. Within 48 hours, I was classified as paranoid schizophrenic with religious delusions, stripped of credentials, evidence seized, sent to St. Agnes Psychiatric Hospital, where I waited, for 11 months, for the right person to tell my story to. The vision. The memories released me. I was back in my own body. Brian Conroy, psychiatrist, skeptic, addict to prescription medication and comfortable numbness. But the bone fragment was still in my hand, still warm, still wrong. And then, reality shattered completely. The interview room dissolved. The concrete walls, the cameras, Pete's face, all of it peeled away like a theater set, revealing something infinitely larger behind it. I tried to scream but had no mouth. Tried to close my eyes but had no eyelids. I was witnessing. Cities burning. I saw New York first. Manhattan on fire. Skyscrapers collapsing not from external force, but from internal corruption, as if the buildings themselves were rotting from within. The streets were filled with people, but they weren't running. They were worshipping, bowing to figures that walked among them. Figures with too many limbs, too many eyes, geometries that violated three-dimensional space. London, Tokyo, Cairo, Jerusalem. Every major city simultaneously aflame. But this wasn't war. This was transformation, conversion, the world being remade into something else, something that served different laws, obeyed different physics, worshipped different gods. The sky tore open, not metaphorically, literally split apart, revealing darkness behind it. Darkness that moved, that hungered, that reached down with appendages I couldn't name toward the burning world below. And from that darkness, I heard a voice. Many voices, all speaking simultaneously in languages that predated human speech. They were calling, summoning, drawing forth entities that had been imprisoned since before the foundation of the world. I saw the false prophet then, standing on a mountain of corpses, preaching to masses of corrupted souls. His voice carried to every corner of the burning world simultaneously, heard in every language, understood by every mind. He promised salvation through submission, eternal life through service, power through abandonment of everything that made humanity human. And behind him, in shadows so deep they seemed to be holes punched through reality, stood the Antichrist. I couldn't see its face, couldn't comprehend its form, but I felt its presence, ancient beyond measure, patient beyond human understanding, implacably opposed to everything creation represented. It was undoing the world, not through destruction, but through corruption. Turning everything back to void and chaos, reversing creation itself, the Valley of Megiddo, Armageddon. I saw it clearly now. Armies clashing on a scale that beggared imagination. But these weren't human armies. Technology and horror merged into weapons that violated reality. Tanks with organic components that screamed when they moved. Soldiers fused with demonic entities, their bodies no longer their own. Aircraft that flew on wings made of tortured souls. Blood covered the ground. Rivers ran red. The earth itself was dying, poisoned by the presence of things that shouldn't exist in material reality. And through it all, I heard one word repeated endlessly: Armageddon, Armageddon, Armageddon. Then everything changed. Light. Pure, terrible, beautiful light that made the darkness flee. A figure appeared on the battlefield and everything stopped. The corrupted armies froze. The entities from beyond reality recoiled. Even the Antichrist, that ancient power, turned to face what had arrived. The figure was radiant, beyond human, divine in ways that transcended religious doctrine. I knew, looking at it, that this was Christ returned, the promise fulfilled, the prophecy made manifest. And the figure turned, looked directly at me. Through flame and chaos and the end of everything, it found me, acknowledged me. Its voice resonated in my soul. You hold the last piece. Resist. I am coming back. Understanding flooded through me. The bone fragment in my hand, it wasn't just evidence. It was a key. The seventh artifact's location was somehow encoded in it, hidden in the symbols, protected by the curse that had killed so many others. My role wasn't to fight, it was to guard, to keep this fragment from those who would use it to complete the ritual, to resist until the promised return. How long? I tried to ask, though I had no voice in this vision. The divine figure's eyes held infinite compassion and infinite judgment, until the appointed time, until the moment when heaven and earth collide. Until then, resist. The vision collapsed. I was back in the interview room, gasping, the bone fragment burning in my hand. Pete was leaning across the table, chains taut, eyes wide with recognition. You saw it, he said. Not a question. You saw what's coming. I couldn't speak. My throat was raw, as if I'd been screaming. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the fragment. And on my palm, where my fingers had gripped the bone, symbols had been burned into my skin. Not painful, but present, permanent. The mark of someone who'd touched cursed truth and survived. It's real, I finally whispered. God help us. It's all real. Pete nodded slowly. Now you understand. Now you know why I couldn't just stay silent. Why I had to tell someone, even if it meant being locked in here forever. I stared at my marked palm. The symbols matched the ones carved into the fragment, proof that the vision wasn't hallucination or delusion. Physical evidence that something had happened. Something beyond my psychiatric training, beyond materialist explanation, beyond comfortable rationality. What am I supposed to do? My voice cracked. I'm just a psychiatrist. I'm nobody. I'm nothing. You're the guardian now, Pete said. Chosen or not, willing or not, you've been marked. The fragment is yours to protect, to hide, to keep from those who would use it to complete the ritual. For how long? Until he returns. That's the promise. That's the hope. Pete's expression was grim but steady. They'll come for you, Brian. The corrupted ones. The organizations. Maybe even elements within the CIA who don't want this truth exposed. You have to run. Have to hide. Have to resist. I looked at the cameras in the corners. Red lights still blinking. Had they recorded the vision? Would they understand what had happened? Or would they just see me collapse, screaming, gripping a piece of ancient bone? I need to get you out of here, I said, the decision forming even as I spoke it. You can't stay. They'll realize you gave me the fragment. They'll kill me. Or worse. Pete nodded. I've known that since the moment I decided to tell you everything. It's fine, Brian. I'm ready. I've been ready for a long time. No. I stood, legs weak, marked palm throbbing. No. You don't get to give up. You survived 4 missions that should have killed you. Survived the plague. Survived 11 months in this place. You survive because you're meant to. Because the resistance needs witnesses. Needs people who've seen what I've seen. Pete's eyes searched my face. Then he smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him. You really believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. My entire worldview just collapsed. I pocketed the bone fragment carefully, wrapping it in the cloth Pete had provided. But I know this. I'm getting you out of here. Tonight. Now. Before they realize what's happened. How? I'm a committed patient in a maximum security psychiatric facility. You can't just... I'm a senior psychiatrist with full credentials. I can forge discharge papers, cite medical necessity, invoke legal protocols they won't question until it's too late. My mind was racing. prescription medication and adrenaline mixing into desperate clarity. We have maybe an hour before they review the footage and realize something happened. Maybe less. We go now or we don't go at all. Pete studied me for a long moment. Then he extended his cuffed hands. Then, uncuff me, doctor. Let's resist together. I pressed the button to call security. Had to maintain the illusion of normalcy. When the guard arrived, I explained that the patient needed to use the restroom, required escort, standard protocols. The guard unlocked Pete's cuffs, kept one hand on his baton, followed us down the corridor. In the bathroom, I created a distraction. Claimed Pete was having a medical episode. When the guard turned to call for assistance, Pete moved. Faster than a 54-year-old man should move, CIA training 28 years in the making. The guard went down silently, unconscious but alive. "We need to go," Pete said, already stripping the guard's uniform. "Right now, before shift change." My office was on the 3rd floor. I forged discharge papers using credentials I'd never abused before tonight. Cited medical emergency, psychiatric hold rescinded, immediate release authorized. The paperwork wouldn't survive scrutiny, but it would buy us time. We walked out through the front entrance. Pete in guard uniform, myself in professional attire, both of us moving with the confidence of people who belonged. The night security barely glanced at the forged documents. My car was in the parking lot. 10-year-old Honda Accord, dented and reliable, the kind of vehicle no one noticed. We got in. I started the engine, pulled out of the lot at exactly the speed limit. Only when we were 3 blocks away did I let myself breathe. "Where are we going?" Pete asked. "I don't know. Somewhere they won't look. Somewhere we can figure out what to do next." "There is no next, Brian. From this moment forward, we're running, hiding, resisting until either they catch us or he returns." Pete looked at my marked palm. "You accepted this role when you touched that fragment. There's no going back." I knew he was right. Everything I'd been before tonight, Dr. Brian Conroy, psychiatrist, divorced, medicated, hiding from life, that person was gone. The vision had burned him away, left someone new, someone marked, someone chosen. "Then we run," I said, "and we resist." The dashboard clock read 11:43 p.m. We drove through Baltimore streets, heading nowhere specific, just away. And as we drove, I noticed the sky changing color. Green-black, purple at the edges. Lightning without thunder, temperature dropping. Pete saw it too. His expression went grim. "They know," he said quietly. "They always know when an artifact is moved, when a guardian is chosen. The corrupted ones, the organizations, they can sense it, feel it, like blood in water." "How long do we have?" "Minutes, maybe less." The storm was forming impossibly fast, wind howling through streets that had been calm seconds earlier, traffic lights flickering, power lines swaying. And in my rearview mirror, I saw vehicles that hadn't been there before. Black SUVs, no visible drivers. "They're coming," Pete said. "Floor it." I did. The Honda Accord wasn't built for high-speed pursuit, but I pushed it anyway. 70 through residential streets, 80 on the highway on-ramp, 90 as we merged into sparse late-night traffic. The SUVs kept pace effortlessly. "They're not going to stop," Pete said. "Not until they have the fragment or we're dead. Probably both." The storm intensified. Rain that felt wrong, too cold, hitting the windshield in patterns rather than random drops. Lightning striking in sequences that looked deliberate. And through it all, I could feel the fragment in my pocket, warm against my leg, pulsing like a heartbeat. We were being herded. I realized it as we drove. The SUVs weren't trying to catch us. They were forcing us toward a specific location, blocking exits, cutting off routes, driving us like wolves driving prey. "They're taking us somewhere," I said. "I know. Question is, do we let them?" Before I could answer, the road ahead was blocked. More SUVs arranged in a barricade across all lanes. I slammed the brakes. The Accord skidded, fishtailed, stopped 10 feet from impact. We were surrounded. 6 vehicles. Dozen figures emerging into the storm. They moved wrong. Too smooth. Too coordinated. Corrupted ones. All of them. Pete and I got out of the car. stood in the howling wind, rain soaking us in seconds, facing the people who'd come for the fragment. No. Not people. Things wearing people's faces. One of them stepped forward, male form, mid-30s, wearing a suit that remained somehow dry despite the rain. When he spoke, his voice had that same quality I'd heard in Pete's memories. Not quite human, coming from somewhere else. "Dr. Conroy, Mr. Sims, you have something that belongs to us." "It doesn't belong to anyone," Pete said. "It's evidence, proof, truth that can't be buried. Truth is what we make it." The figure tilted its head at an angle that was just slightly wrong. "The ritual requires 7 artifacts. You hold the key to finding the 7th. Surrender it, and we'll make your deaths painless." "And if we don't?" I asked. The figure smiled. "Then we make them very painful indeed." The other corrupted ones closed in. I could see their faces now. Or rather, what was wearing their faces. Eyes that reflected light wrong. Mouths that moved without quite syncing to the words they spoke. Hands that had too many fingers or too few, depending on how you looked. Pete stepped in front of me, protecting me despite having no weapon, no leverage, no hope of survival. Just the decision to resist. To stand between evil and what must be protected. "You'll have to go through me," he said. We were planning to anyway. They moved, and then lightning struck. The lightning struck between us, white fire carving reality apart. In that instant, I saw the radiant figure from my vision, not intervening, just present, bearing witness to our choice to resist. The light faded. The corrupted ones backed away. The lightning had created a barrier they couldn't cross. "How long will this last?" I shouted over the wind. "Not long enough," Pete shouted back, "but long enough to talk." "About what?" "About why we're doing this." He turned to face me, rain streaming down his face. "You saw the end of everything. You could walk away, give them what they want, save yourself, and condemn the world? The world's already condemned. Armageddon is coming whether we resist or not." His eyes were steady. "So why fight? If the outcome is predetermined, why resist?" "Because it matters," I said. "Every moment until the end matters. Every soul that can be saved, every person who sees the truth. It all matters." "Does it? Or are we just pretending our choices mean something when we're powerless?" I looked at my marked palm. I spent 3 years hiding from life, medicating myself into numbness. That kind of existence isn't living. It's just waiting to die. The corrupted ones tested the barrier, finding weak points. "The vision showed me 2 paths," I continued. "One where evil wins because good people stay silent, and one where individuals choose to stand, even knowing it might cost everything." Pete smiled grimly. "That's the answer. We resist not because we'll win, but because resistance is what makes us human, what separates us from entities that traded away their capacity to choose." The barrier flickered, weakening. "When they break through, we run together," I said. "No heroic sacrifices. We resist together, or not at all." The barrier collapsed. We ran into the storm, rain lashing our faces. Behind us, footsteps that moved too fast. Pete pulled me down an alley between warehouses. "They're hurting us," I said after 3 blocks. "I know, but where else can we go?" The alley opened to a wider street. At the far end, a church. Old stone building, steeple rising into the storm-dark sky. Lights glowing through stained glass. "Sanctuary," I said. We ran. The corrupted ones followed but didn't close the distance. The church doors were unlocked. We stumbled inside, found ourselves in a space that smelled of old wood and candle wax. Peace, or the memory of it. "I stopped believing," I said, walking down the aisle. "After my divorce, after I failed everyone, I decided God was a comfortable lie, that the universe was random, meaningless. And now? Now I know what I've seen. The vision was real. The artifacts are real." I stared at the cross above the altar. Maybe belief doesn't matter, maybe truth exists whether I accept it or not. Pete nodded. "Faith isn't about certainty. It's about choosing to act as if truth matters, even when you're terrified. The church doors exploded inward. Wood turned to ash. The corrupted ones walked through the wreckage. Sacred ground didn't stop them. We backed toward the altar. They surrounded us. 12 of them, forms flickering between human and something else. The one who'd spoken before stepped forward. You've made your choice. Resistance over survival. Noble. Futile. Ultimately meaningless. It means everything, I said. It means we're still human. Still refusing to serve what you serve. And what do we serve? Void. Chaos. The undoing of creation. You're unmaking everything. The figure smiled. Creation was a mistake. We're correcting that error. Returning everything to nothing. Then you'll fail, Pete said. The vision showed Christ returning. Evil defeated. Did it? Or did it show you hope in your final moments? The figure tilted its head. How do you know what you witnessed was truth? Doubt crept in. What if the vision was false? Then I looked at my marked palm. Felt the fragment's weight. Because the artifacts don't lie. They reveal truth. The fragment showed me what's coming. Warning, not manipulation. Then you'll die warned. The figure gestured. Lightning struck through the roof. Through stained glass. Through stone. A pillar of light splitting reality. And in that light, I saw him again. The radiant figure. Standing in fire and glory. Not intervening but present. Acknowledging our choice. I understood. Resistance itself is the point. The choice to stand. That choice is what makes us human. The corrupted ones recoiled. Not destroyed, but weakened. The figure blazed with truth, and their presence near it was unbearable. They're leaving, Pete said. They backed through the entrance, retreating, but the one who'd spoken turned back. This changes nothing. The ritual will be completed. Armageddon comes whether you resist or not. His voice faded. But we acknowledge that you stood when you could have knelt, for whatever that's worth. Then they were gone. The storm dissipated. The figure faded. Pete collapsed into a pew. We survived. This time. I looked at my marked palm. But they'll come back. They always do. Pete met my eyes. This is your life now. Running, hiding, resisting. Until the appointed time. How long? I don't know. Years. Decades. But that's the promise. Resist until he returns. Then I resist. We resist. Pete nodded. We hide the fragment where they'll never find it. We tell others what we've seen. We wake people up before it's too late. We left the destroyed church. The night had gone quiet. Stars overhead, cold and distant. My car was still there. We got in. I started the engine. Where do we go? I asked. Underground. There are others like us scattered across the country. Pete looked at the fragment on the dashboard. We find them, join them. And the fragment? We hide it. The 7th artifact must remain hidden until the appointed time. I drove through Baltimore streets coming back to life. Early morning traffic. People heading to work, unaware. Do you think we made any difference? I asked. Pete was quiet. Then, every moment of resistance matters. Every person who stands when they could kneel. It all adds up. Maybe, when Christ returns, those lights will guide him home. We drove another 20 minutes before Pete directed me to pull over near a subway station. This is where I get off, he said. There's an envelope in the glove box. New identity. Cash. Contact protocols. Study them. Memorize them. Burn them. I retrieved the envelope. You planned this. For 11 months, I knew someone would come. He opened the door. Take care of yourself, Brian. And take care of that fragment. Everything depends on keeping it hidden. Pete, don't thank me. Just resist. He started to walk away, then turned back. When doubt creeps in, and it will, remember what you saw. Remember you were marked for a reason. You're not alone in this fight. Then he was gone. 6 months later, I'm recording this testimony. Pete was right. They came for me 3 times. Each time, the fragment pulsed warning. Each time, I stayed one step ahead. New cities, new identities. I found the others he mentioned. The network of marked individuals. Some touched artifacts. Others witnessed events they couldn't explain, all carrying knowledge that made them targets. We share testimonies, build safe houses, warn each other, create a web of resistance. The corrupted ones are everywhere. Government, corporations, churches. But there are more of us than I expected. People who've seen, who know, who refuse to forget. The prophecy is real. Armageddon is coming. But until it arrives, we resist. I still carry the fragment. Still feel it pulse. Still see the symbols on my palm. They're hunting us. But they haven't found the fragment. Haven't silenced us. Haven't made us kneel. This is my testimony. Dr. Brian Conroy, guardian of Cain's rib fragment, marked by divine vision. The question isn't whether the prophecy is real. I've seen it. Carry proof burned into my flesh. The question is, what will you do when you see the truth? Will you look away? Go back to comfortable lies? Or will you resist? The war has already begun. Or has the corrupted ones move among us, preparing for the ritual? The seventh artifact remains hidden, but they're searching. When they find it, when all seven are gathered, the final seal will break. The doorways will open, and Armageddon, real, literal, biblical Armageddon, will begin. But until that moment, we resist. Every day, every hour. Pete's final words echo. They know. They're coming. Resist. So I resist, until he returns. That's the promise. That's the hope. That's the truth I'll die defending. Resist.